Crop Talk on Market Journal is supported by Nebraska soybean farmers and their checkoff film. Finally today, earlier last month, Nebraska Extension held their annual soil health conference. One of the guest speakers was Iowa State's Dr. Marshal McDaniel. He is a soil science expert involved in sustainable agriculture and environmental science. At the conference, he discussed the work that's been done with crop diversity. We're able to catch up with Dr. McDaniel shortly after his visit to the Cornhusker State to discuss his research and what it could mean for producers. Dr. McDaniel, set this topic up for us. You recently presented at the Soil Health Conference. What do you mean by rediversifying crop rotations?
Yeah, it's great to be here with you. I'm really excited, Bryce. And so what I mean by rediversifying agriculture systems is, and I often colloquially refer to it as grandpa's rotation. I've heard a lot of farmers tell me about their grandpa's rotation, which usually included a small grain and maybe a few years of alfalfa. And so we have a long-term experiment here in central Iowa near Ames, where we've been testing this longer diversified rotation with oats and alfalfa compared to what I like to call the business as usual corn soybean rotation. And we found overwhelming evidence of the benefits to soil health and sustainability that I'm hoping we can talk more about today.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more about that research site and some of the things you've learned so far. But one more time, say the crops you've been rotating there and some of the results you've seen.
Yeah, so our control, or the business as usual, is a corn soybean rotation, and the experiment has now been in place for over 21 years. So we've got a long history of looking at these management effects on soil health, but among other responses, including pest management, weed management, economics, other kind of performance indicators, including yield, crop yield being one of the major data sets we collect. But yeah, the more diversified rotation, there are two other rotations besides corn soybeans. There's a corn, soybean, oat, and then red clover, and that also receives mostly composted cattle manure as its source of fertility rather than synthetic fertilizer. And then there's a corn, what we call the 4-year rotation: corn, soybean, oats, alfalfa during that year, and then another year of alfalfa that we will also then add composted cattle manure, and that one we, as I mentioned, we call the 4-year rotation.
So what have you seen when it comes to the results? Is there one that's been better than the other?
Oh, absolutely. It's if you look across the board with all these kind of performance indicators, especially soil health, there's more microbial activity, there's more earthworms, the penetration resistance, or the kind of pressure that crop roots encounter when they're growing in the soil is lower, which is better under the 4-year rotation compared to the 2-year rotation. We've got nitrogen in more kind of slow release forms. The bulk density is lower under the 4-year rotation. We've got better weed suppression, so we have to apply less inputs like herbicides. We've also shown that adding the cattle manure and having a legume like alfalfa, which is a very good nitrogen fixing crop, we've lowered our synthetic fertilizer inputs, which is important to farmers these days because of the high price of nitrogen fertilizer. And yeah, the list goes on. There's more I could go over, but I think that's kind of the ones that come to top of mind. One that some of the growers asked about is the profitability. And if you look at all things considered, the profitability is a little bit higher in the 4-year rotation, although it's not, we called it statistically significant in kind of academic jargon. So if you look at a plot by plot level, it's not statistically significant, but on average, a little bit more profitable.
Okay, well, you set this up. Seems to be the more profitable route and improving soil health to go with one of those other rotations. What's your suggestion at this point with all the years of research you have to Midwest ag producers when it comes to their crop rotations?
I would look for any way to diversify, and by diversify, I mean integrating livestock. We happen to do it with by adding composted cattle manure, but I saw a couple great talks when I was out in Nebraska. Some people are grazing cattle out on their farms, and that's a way to have an automated manure spreader out in the field rather than having to add the compost with machinery. And so that has benefits as well. So kind of reintegrating livestock, but also adding the small grain, and a crop like alfalfa or a legume like red clover has a lot of benefits in reducing fertilizer inputs and having these other benefits to soil biology and soil health.